For a long time, I believed I was frozen, that my stillness was weakness. But what I've come to understand is that it wasn't freeze at all. It was love trapped inside captivity, the instinct to keep life warm when everything around me was cold. What you're about to hear is something I lived long before I had words for it. I call it the fifth trauma response, the incubate response. This is the story of the ocean, the egg, and the rebirth. How the very endurance that kept me alive became the same strength that set me free. The incubate response originates in the autistic system, the sacred instinct to preserve life, meaning, and connection. From childhood, this instinct compels the survivor to protect what feels precious, the egg. But under captivity, the egg is a false one, an illusion created by the predator or toxic system. It carries the shape of love, but none of it is warmth. The autistic devotion shelters this false egg with loyalty, believing it to be real. The ADHD circuitry then floods the process with motion and endurance, circling endlessly, feeding the illusion with effort, attention, and hyper-focus, determined to bring life where there is only emptiness. The autistic side holds the egg. The ADHD side keeps trying to hatch it, and the result is decades of empathic captivity. Healing begins when the survivor recognizes the false egg for what it is, an implanted devotion that served the abuser's architecture. It must be released and purged. Only then can the true egg form, the authentic seed of self and inner child that was never allowed to exist. This realization propels the healing process because the survivor finally understands it was never their capacity to incubate that was broken, and it was never their endurance that was defective. Their loyalty, patience, and infinite care were never the problem, only the direction. What once flooded outward can now flow inward. When this redirection happens, healing accelerates beyond what most therapeutic or medical frameworks predict. The same neurobiological machinery that sustained survival now fuels regeneration. The autistic devotion becomes sacred stillness. The ADHD drive becomes living propulsion. Together, they create a self-healing ecosystem, a return of the ocean to its rightful shore. The fifth response, incubate. The ocean, the egg, and the rebirth. Before sacred stillness can come, the survivor must face what she has been incubating all along. For years, sometimes decades, she has held something that was never hers to keep alive. What she believed was love was often a false egg, a lifeless construct shaped by those who could not return her devotion. Yet her autistic devotion and ADHD endurance made her hold it close, circling, warming, protecting, believing that if she only loved hard enough, it would hatch into real connection. But this was not life. It was a stone egg, a cold shell of captivity, and beneath her, the ocean churned, waves of grief, hope, and terror rising and collapsing inside her body, the same body that refused to let go. Each re-traumatization was another storm, another flood within the cage, and still she stayed, not because she was weak, but because she was wired to preserve life at all costs. It was the holiest instinct turned inward, trapped in a loop of love without landing. And when the survivor finally dares to set down that false egg, the one she's guarded like her own soul, the body trembles. At first, the release feels like betrayal, as though she's abandoning the very thing that defined her faithfulness. But as her hands open, something extraordinary begins to form within her. A new egg, luminous and tender, the inner child's first safe home. The ocean, once a prison, becomes a cradle. Its waves no longer drown her, but begin to rock her gently toward rebirth. In captivity, the autistic side's instinct to protect and nurture, the penguin effect, was fused with fear. She believed that if she could just keep loving enough, waiting enough, believing enough, the frozen would thaw, the mask would hatch, and love would finally live. But what she was guarding was not merely frozen, it was stone, a cold, heavy shell of captivity, absorbing every drop of warmth she poured into it. Beneath its surface, the false egg was not only empty, but poisoned, releasing its toxins slowly, silently. Each act of devotion fed its decay until her own vitality began to fade. The egg itself was killing her, contaminating her from the inside out. The very environment became a toxic wasteland. Love turned corrosive. Hope turned venomous. Yet still, she stayed, believing her endurance could redeem it. She mistook dying for devotion. But the egg she was guarding was not life. It was a false egg, a mask that could never hatch. Every act of devotion poured warmth into a shell that only reflected her own light back at her. This is the tragedy and brilliance of the Incubate response, the divine instinct to protect life redirected toward death. When the survivor finally recognizes the false egg for what it is, the body trembles because release feels like a betrayal at first. She has kept that egg warm for years, sometimes decades, believing it was love itself. Yet when she lays it down, something miraculous happens. Out of the grief and emptiness, the body begins to form a new egg, not for the predator, but for the inner child. This egg holds her truest self, her life, her innocence, her imagination, her unbroken capacity to love. The autistic side resumes her original purpose, holding this new life steady, tender, and safe. The ADHD side floods it with warmth and vitality, The same endurance once used to keep predators alive is now used to keep herself alive. Together, they birth the beginning of embodied healing. A love that no longer leaks outward toward danger, but circulates inward toward restoration. Sacred stillness and the freedom to sail and soar. When the ocean of flooding finally quiets, the survivor meets a sensation never felt before: peace without collapse. For most of her life, the body contained an impossible paradox, an endless tsunami trapped inside a cage. It was both a prison and a storm. Motion without freedom, depth without direction. Each re-traumatization flooded the cage again, higher and harder, until even breath became unbearable. She lived in the physical sensation of drowning without dying. Lungs filled with panic, heart pounding against the bars, desperate for reprieve. Death often appeared as the only imagined escape. This is not metaphorical drowning. It is the embodied reality of captivity. Terror trapped within love. Love trapped within terror. A nervous system imprisoned inside its own ocean. Now, as the cage dissolves, the body begins to rest, not because it has given up, but because it has finally been released. This is sacred stillness, the nervous system's first experience of safety that does not depend on control. The autistic side anchors here, rediscovering its original gift: the ability to be without vigilance. Meanwhile, the ADHD side, long bound to motion through panic, pursuit, and performance, discovers freedom to sail and soar. She learns to ride the waves instead of being pulled by riptides, to catch the currents of exhilaration without fear of drowning. Movement becomes play instead of survival. Exploration becomes expression. Creation becomes communion. And in this synergy, the stillness and the freedom she learns to attach to herself. No longer searching for surrogates, no longer mistaking captivity for love, she begins to play again, this time with real Jesus, who had kept her safe all along. The same presence who breathed life into her when she wanted to die now breathes within her, a living rhythm of resurrection. Together they form the full circle of regulation, the stillness to be, the freedom to sail, and the courage to soar. This marks the beginning of embodied life, where both sides of the AuDHD system coexist, one steady and one expansive, each honoring the other's sacred rhythm in living sacred peace. If you're still sitting beside your own unhatched egg, please know this: nothing about your love was ever wasted. You were never broken for caring too deeply. The same endurance that once kept others alive can now keep you alive. Let it flow back toward your own heart, because that's where healing begins. This space, this sanctuary, is for every survivor learning how to rest inside safety for the very first time. You are safe, you are seen, and you are deeply loved. Love, Rhea.